We had been speaking about divine revelation, sometimes called sacred doctrine, and we mentioned the fact why it was called sacred, because we're not supposed to touch it with our bare hands. Sometimes it is also called the commandments of Christ, or in short, divine love or God's love, sometimes referred to also as the perfection of charity. These are different words for the same thing, divine revelation. Now, the job of the Church of Christ is to collect the teachings of Christ, the sacred doctrine, to preserve it, and then transmit it as a whole. Now, this is a job really for a group of people, which are the ministers of the church, the bishops and the priests. That is their only job, and if it's the only thing that they did in their life, it would have been a great accomplishment. But then, we also are bound to preserve divine revelation. The way it goes is that you see the church gives it to the bishop transmits it to the priest transmits it to husbands and wives, then the husbands and wives to their children. That is how it should be. Because divine revelation is a formula on how we are going to save our souls or how to go to heaven. If it contains the road to heaven, not only bishops and priests should know about it, parents should know about it, and children should know about it. But how can the children know if it is not transmitted effectively from the bishop down to the parents? The duty of transmitting the love of God down to the generation of the human race is not only on bishops and priests, it is a duty upon all Christians. Because if we don't have it, how can we save our souls? If your house is burning, you don't wait for the firemen to come and say, "It's their job, not mine." It's your house. And so the same thing with salvation. If the bishop and the priest have not handed it down to you on how to save your soul, as found in the sacred doctrines, why? You should find it out yourself. The teachings of God on divine love has been established. It has been given to man. It's complete. It is very simple. The words are very exact and can be understood even by children. All you have to do is go there. There is no need of anyone to explain it to you. You just have to go to the fonts. The Catholic Church call it the fonts of divine revelation. The wordings of this sacred doctrine is so simple and so precise that you can leave the entire teachings of the sacred doctrine in the hands of individuals. And these individuals can use it for the sanctification of their souls, even by themselves. As long as they don't distort it by rash judgment, by carelessness, by pride, and by useless speculation. This precisely is how a Christian soul is absorbed into the Church of Christ, in that the entire teaching of the sacred doctrine is given to him, is laid on his hands, the fullness of the teachings of Christ. It was given during baptism. That's the reason why when a child, well, a Christian child, shall we say, is baptized, he is told to recite one by one the truths of divine revelation. And here is where the duties of the sponsors come in, that they are supposed to make sure that the child, their God child, understands the fullness of divine revelation. If they don't teach them, they have failed in their job and have sinned against the church. It is the duty of bishops to transmit the entire sacred doctrines to priests. For priests, it's their duty to transmit it to parents. And parents, it's their duty to transmit it to children. And godparents are duty-bound to help parents transmit it to the children. And so anything that you do that prevents this from happening is a dereliction of duty. When the so-called creed, which is the summary of the sacred doctrine, is given to an infant Christian, it's just a summary. It is just the main doctrines and the main teachings. As the little child grows, he has to unfold these doctrines, these truths. It is called the development of doctrine. In other words, he must develop a deeper and a greater knowledge of the summary of the truths given to him in the creed. And when the child grows into childhood, then this doctrine has to unfold more the development of Christian doctrine, and this is done through catechizing the child. And when he grows further into maturity, this doctrine must still further develop and grow by means of contemplation. And there is no end in the development of this doctrine, no end into learning this doctrine, because it is divine doctrines. It is infinite. You will always have to learn. And so the greatest advice of St. Paul to his communities and to his listeners is to keep the faith and try to avoid all profane emptiness of modifying the faith, of changing the words, changing the meaning, altering the message, because anyone who would do this is surely going to end up in error. Faith in the concept of St. Paul is a very definite doctrine with very precise words. The term he uses, the form of sound words. Now just see how important words are in divine revelation. You have baptism, change one word, and the child remains a pagan. The same thing goes with the sacrifice of the Mass. Look at the words of consecration. You change one word, and there is no Christ on the altar table. Keep the faith, St. Paul tells Timothy. And then he adds this advice to Timothy to commit in turn to faithful men. Just give it to faithful men. Don't give it to careless men. Commit in turn to faithful men who should be able to teach others the entire contents of divine revelation. Today in Christianity, there are so many errors. And one of the causes of these errors is they never want to accept the fullness of divine revelation. Most often, they would say, well, these truths are first-class truths and these ones are second-class. There is no such thing in sacred doctrine. In fact, we have absolutely no way to find out which is more important than the other. That's beyond human reasoning, beyond the capability of human reasoning. Sometimes man today tries to analyze or simplify or refashion divine revelation. Christ have already told us that the way to be saved is deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And they analyze and simplify it into mere acts of faith. Or sometimes just the verbal mentioning of a short phrase like Jesus is Lord. Then they also sometimes consider that there are such things as primary truths and secondary truths, or impertinent truths and very important truths, to the point that they sometimes make sacred doctrine summarize into one sentence, and they say, this is the essence of Christian doctrine. The most basic doctrine of the Catholic Church is the Blessed Trinity. And almost the last doctrine in the Creed is the resurrection of Christ. Now, in between those two are hundreds of doctrines. At baptism, we receive the outline of divine revelation, and as we grow up into childhood, we must develop our knowledge of these sacred truths. And as this knowledge develops in us to the fullness, we hope that one day when you go to Mass, you can witness and make a confession that you are truly a child of God. God bless you.